the book club presented by Strike Map UK and Pluto Press. My name is Henry Fowler and I'm a co-founder of Strike Map with my good friend and comrade Robert Paul. Strike Map is a digital worker-powered map that helps us share solidarity and to plot the strike action happening across the UK. Our book club is exploring and celebrating the fantastic Workers' Inquiry and Global Class Struggle, Strategies, Tactics and Objectives, edited by Robert, who's on this call today. This episode, we're looking at the excellent chapter by Dario Burzstyn, who we're joined by as well, which discusses the power of the Argentine Truckers Union. We're also joined by Antek, an Amazon driver in Poland, building a union as part of the Workers' Initiative organisation. Before we hear from both Dario and Antek, we have the man himself, Robert Avets, who spoke with us last time about his chapter in this book. But before I pass to Robert, I just want to say to everyone, if you're watching on Facebook, please put your questions in the comments and which speaker you would like to address your question. And if you're joining us via the Zoom platform, please use the Q&A function that you see at the bottom of your screen. During the call, my tech team, a fantastic tech team behind the scenes, will be putting in links and different things for you to join in the conversation. So please do also share your comments with us. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Robert now. Good evening to you, Robert.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us. I just want to say that I've been looking forward to this really incredible multi-continental conversation between Dario and Antek about logistics, workers, organizing, and it's just a great realization of Dario's chapter. So welcome to everyone. And also, if you're interested in getting a copy of the book, we'll be putting a discount code in the chat. So I look forward to the next session with another one of our contributors coming up pretty soon. So look out for that and please help us spread the word. So I'll turn it over to Dario and Antek.
Well, hello. Good afternoon for me, good evening for England, and of course, good morning for the West Coast in America. My name is Dario Burzstyn. I am Argentinian. I am a journalist and sociologist. I studied here, and I speak some languages, and I make translations of books from Italy, some famous and philosophical authors. And my permanent job is at the National Radio. I am a researcher and an expert in international news and economics. But my other concerns regards work and struggles, and I've been doing some research with that. That's why a friend of us, of Robert and me and many others, like Emmanuel Ness or Manny Ness, read a work I wrote some years ago, and he asked me that work to be included in a book, which is over here, just to make a glimpse. And in that book, I wrote a chapter dedicated to the metro workers and their union. And this was interesting because, you know, when you look at Argentina and when you look at the city, you of course, maybe you don't know our country, but Buenos Aires is kind of a country in itself. That's 1/3 of the total population of the country and is one of the top richest cities in the world. So my question, I wonder, was what stops when the metro stops? After that, I went on thinking of what stops the economy, not the city. So I studied which kind of economy we do have now in Argentina in these contemporary days. So maybe you don't know, but one of the things we must think about is that European countries and philosophers and economists of European countries, in one way or another, make a path to understand and to learn how the world works. And this goes back to Hegel, when he thought that nations without history, he called that, couldn't make politics. So my new research, when my new friend Robert Ovets called me, was the starting point was, what do people know about Argentina and history and struggles to make it known, so you can understand what is going on in the contemporary days in Argentina and in the workers' struggles. So then of the 3 or 4 main struggles and unions, I decided to concentrate in one of those, which is the camioneros or truckers. Why? Because the history of Argentina is very, very attached to the railroads and to the railroad workers. But after the 60s and maybe the 70s, this changed a lot. And then the railroads or railways went into bankruptcy, program bankruptcy, and the truckers, I mean the factories and the highways and the tolls they charge, became into power. So in that schedule, my question was, which is the role today of regarding that union? So I propose you to share this PowerPoint I prepared, because the slides very shortly will give you a better idea. Of course, this is me. Thank you very much to Pluto Press and of course my friends of Strike Map UK, because they organized this, and it's amazing to share this worldwide. Next, please. Next, there we go. So what you may need to understand is that the integration of the Argentine economy was very, very early into the world capitalism, which of course was led by Great Britain during 2 centuries. What Argentinians in those days was not Argentinian, was the viceroyalty of the River de la Plata, produced, where was useful for the Caribbean and the slavery in other countries. But you must remember that we were part of the Spaniard monarchy, and that kind of business was not permitted. That business, following independence from Spain, which was a cycle of 1810, 1816, maintained the links between the privileged in the city of Buenos Aires, which was the port and the customs, and the British investments. What we saw, raw materials, what the colony, semi-colony economy went on was selling raw materials, as you will see in the next slide, please. So the history of colonialism and dependency will help us to understand the changing composition of capital, not only in this very moment, but in the past, of course, with the resulting class struggles. That fixation of a primary model economy was, of course, beneficial for the oligarchies in those days and today's, and of course, to the port of Buenos Aires. What happened in the provinces, this huge territory of more than 2.7 million square kilometers, the peasants, the gauchos, and the provinces live. In that point, it appears the caudillos. Caudillos were the local leaders with some power, territorial power, which were against the power of Buenos Aires, against customs, and of course, against the powers of foreign economies. So this marks our history and marks all the struggles, because it was, and it is, a bifrontal struggle against the port and against foreign capitals. So this is a clear point that I ask you to remember, because when you see the arrival of my grandparents, who came from Poland, for example, as I said to Andrzej 5 minutes ago, many of them brought anarchism or socialist ideas, but those ideas could flourish because of all the struggle, the local struggles of the poor people that already were living in this country. So this early commitment into International Workers' League and the first unions before 1880 and the first strikes were not the result of the arrival of socialist, anarchist, and communist ideas from Europe. It was a mixture. Next slide, please. There you can see how the railroads looked at the beginning of 20th century, and you can see over there the river, the sea, and Buenos Aires. All the trains went to the port because all the primary economy was dedicated to export, mainly to Britain, and then it changed to other economies. Next, please. So what happens when Britain falls as the main economy, main capitalist economy in the world, and the United States rises? What about Argentina? It's in the question, it worked as a British semi-colony. So all the military coups which were world famous in Latin America and in Argentina were commanded by the oligarchies. There was a conflict at the hegemonic bloc between that oligarchy and the agro-exporter latifundio, which only needed and wanted export and the dominion of the port, and those interests that wanted to industrialize the country with the newcomers. After that, matures a conflict between the industrial proletariat and capitalists, and there it appears Peronism, which is very difficult to understand from the foreign history and a foreign country. In those decades, 40s and 50s, those railways were nationalized and it was created the welfare state. That welfare state, to the right you can see, after the last military coup, it appears neoliberalism, privatization, the destruction of the local industry, high foreign debt, unemployment, and of course, the destruction of the railways. Why? Because international interests wanted to increase the automotive industry, construct highways with toll payment, and subsequently, it appears at that moment the truckers' union at the top of the power. Next, please. In the second wave of the 90s, the neoliberalism results in what maybe you know, it is the Argentinazo. Argentinazo in December 2001, it will be 20 years, December this year, with the famous to leave them all or to live all. What happened? It happened that the CBAs were almost entirely suppressed with the flexibilization of the economy, highest industrial and agro-industrial investment in related exports, a new re-privatization of economy, and the famous localization of social policies, and etc., of the World Bank. So over 30% the population was in poverty, high unemployment, and there it appears a word that the striped map UK show every day, which are the piqueteros, piquets, people protesting at the door, in the streets, on the in every single corner of the country, asking for jobs and asking for food. Why do I put this in this slide? Because piqueteros and this movement you can see in the photo in December 2001 is a landmark, a very particular milestone that changed what the unions and the political parties could do after that. So I will cover very shortly in the next minutes what happened with the unions and of course with camioneros. Next, please. So in this context, what was the role of the truckers union? The leadership of that union is Hugo Moyano. Hugo Moyano, as you can see the name written there, is a real caudillo. That's why I wrote that word at the beginning of this PowerPoint, because the politics in Argentina is not parliamentary. It's very strongly presidentially with the parliament, of course. The union's constant defense of its members' collective bargaining, the CBA, was what Moyano and his group defended every time. And they created a group of union inspectors visiting the factories. That was the result of a high rate of affiliation. Over 70% of people working as truckers in every single branch is affiliated to the union. After that, they could add new branches because there were workers in other unions that wanted to join Camioneros because of the benefits. They could get very high salaries compared with any other union of the country. And they negotiated benefits per branch. What do I mean? I mean, a soil common to all the truckers plus benefits by branch. That's why if you read the chapter, you will see they have more than 17 branches covering the whole economy. And something which is very important, which it was in the slide we have just passed, which is the destruction of the welfare state after the neoliberalism was in some way or another replaced by the health services that the union could give to their affiliates. What do they add? They add these piquetes, the pickets that they learned and were empowered after the Argentinazo of December 2001. Next, please. So the quick conclusions I want to state is that the state quitted during decades, as maybe it quitted with Margaret Thatcher in the UK or with Reagan in America or in some other countries. Camioneros and Hugo Moyano and the union revived kind of welfare. Hugo Moyano is a caudillo anchored in that national imaginary of the territorial power. The street boss that renewed the strategies surpassing the unions and the traditional political parties. And something which is like in the middle of all this, neither the new governments, neither the past governments, which of course are not dictatorship, are democratically elected, they do not want to change this status quo. They want to maintain this primarized economy, exporting everything related to agro-industrial and maybe mining and maybe some oils and some seeds. That's more than 60% of the exports, maybe 70% of the exports are related to a primarized economy. The camioneros, the truckers, are in the middle of this, and if they stop, they paralyze the country. Why? Because the whole economy is related to services and this primarized economy. Where do you bring those primary production? The ports, to the river, to the sea, the map you have seen 5 minutes ago. So if the train was destroyed, it must be transported by loads, by the truckers. That's the power they have, combined with what I showed recently. And the I would say the owners of the economy, the neoliberalism, which are finance, industry, agribusiness, I would put it as a general umbrella, do not want to change this, but the state neither, because they get the revenues those taxes. So if they stop the country, they stop the state revenues and the capitalists. The effective leadership of the CGT. CGT is the Confederación General del Trabajo, which reunites the major unions. Had the leadership of this Hugo Moyano, and he retired. But being outside the CGT, it is the key figure because the salaries and the power he can fight for and fix marks the whole pack. Lastly, understanding those roots I wrote before, the bifrontal struggle between the interior poors and Buenos Aires, which is the oligarchy, the rich, and the European city. This struggle was never solved. So there is an identification of the poors and the darkies with this kind of caudillos like Hugo Moyano. Next, please. So this is a very short explanation of history and why the struggles and why the truckers union has the power it has, and why these nations like Argentina not only had a history, even though they don't recognize those days. So you can understand what happens in South America with the new ideas that came with immigrants, socialists, anarchists, and communists, and it had some very interesting, union, and I'd say they joined with the struggles that were already in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dario. That's a really excellent overview. And during your contribution, we put in the chat a few times. I'll ask colleagues again on the tech team to put in the chat the link to your chapter to read it in full, because it is excellent. And that's a fantastic, very short summary. So thank you very much for that. So before we come to questions, I want people now to get your questions in. After you've heard what Dario said, in Facebook, please use comments, and in Zoom, please use Q&A. We're going to come to Antek now, who's going to talk about building his own union as a truck driver in Poland, and to discuss that a little bit further with us, and maybe reflecting on some of the similarities and differences from what Dario said in his contribution. So Antek, come to you first, and then we'll come to some questions. So please get your questions in now, and if it's for Antek or Dario, that would be great, or even Robert, please get those in. Thanks, and evening to you, Antek.
Thank you for your invitation. Okay, so my name is Antek. I'm a worker, an international transport driver, driving trucks, and I participate in a workers' initiative, Inicjatywa Pracownicza, which is a grassroots trade union. Our approach towards organizing is our objective is not always building a formal union. Sometimes it might be an obstacle for the workers' emancipation. So we use this as a tool. Yeah. So sometimes informal workers' collective might be more efficient, depending on the composition of workers and the conditions of the sector or a certain company. So basically, I'd like to speak on organizing and the conditions of working under Amazon of international transport drivers. Polish transport drivers are, basically within the European Union, more than 25% of international transport drivers come out of Poland, and they might be either Polish or Ukrainian or Lithuanian. But basically, the companies are registered in Poland. So the European Union's economy is totally dependent on Polish transport workers and Ukrainian and Lithuanian. within Amazon is even like even more of the transport workers come from our part of Europe, meaning Eastern Europe. So if you go to any of the warehouses of Amazon, but also DHL, Hermes, whatever, like UPS, in the parkings, in the yards of these warehouses, you see that most of the trucks are got the Polish plates, are registered in Poland. So like within Amazon, I think more than 80% of drivers come from this part of Europe. So it's totally dependent on us. Amazon uses subcontractors, so we are not directly hired by the company, but instead the company introduced this kind of competition between the subcontractors. So our bosses win the contracts through the online market, sort of market, win the routes or short-term or longer-term contracts for Amazon. So all the stuff is very dispersed. But I work in one of the biggest subcontractors, which hires around 1,000 workers, 1,000 transport drivers. Around 60 or 70% of them, maybe 60, are Polish. 30 or so are Ukrainian. There's some Belarusian as well. Most of the companies are based near the German border, but the workers come from the east, meaning the more underdeveloped part of Poland, the rural places, the ones with the higher unemployment, or from Ukraine. So most of the international transport drivers drive to their work 500, 600, 600 kilometers even, yeah. And then we drive for 22, 28, 40 days in a row. Some people, I met last week, I met Belarusian people in the parking lot that drive for 4 months in a row without coming back home. So yeah, this is the basic conditions in which we work. Amazon also as from the logistic part also depends on Polish workers a lot. Yeah, so it builds more and more warehouse. I was the Amazon warehouse worker as well before I moved to the transport sector. Yeah, Amazon also builds lots of its sites near the German border, sometimes even as close as 5 kilometers to the border. But it pays 4 or 5 times less than for German warehouse workers. And 90% of the stuff that we packed, the people are still packing, and that I was packing, now I'm transporting, are designed for the German or Western market. Yes, yeah, there's no literally, maybe like 2 or 3% of the packages sorted in Amazon warehouses are being consumed by Polish people, by people in Poland, living in Poland. Mostly, we move them to the West. So we drive to Germany, France, England, Spain, Italy, literally everywhere. And within 20 days, we can move the same amount of kilometers that is necessary to move between the oceans 2 times from the United States, between the Atlantic to Pacific and Pacific to Atlantic, around 10,000, more than 10,000 kilometers, 12,000 kilometers in a row, yeah, in 1 month. Yeah, so basically, because of the dispersion of the workers through to various subcontractors, and because of the fact that we move for so many days, and we start our trips not in the same moment, it's not like this poses a big. It's not easy to organize. Like for example, for the transport workers that work locally, or for whatever, like factory workers or warehouse workers, where you can distribute leaflets every day. You can meet, or even every week at least. The moment when people leave or enter the warehouse or the factory, we mostly move, and we hardly meet each other directly. So I might be in Italy while my brother or my uncle or my other comrades might be in England or Germany, whatever. Yeah. We, when organizing, we like depend on the support from the logistic workers. So when we started distributing leaflets, for example, demanding higher wages in February this year, we gained a lot of support from our union, from the workers' initiative, warehouse workers, where we anyway our trucks are going to take the stuff or lead the stuff. But for now, like, it's mostly the Polish warehouse workers that are part of this network. Even though within Amazon grassroots Amazon movement, we formed as warehouse workers, we got this Amazon Workers International, which comprises the militant workers from Poland, Germany, Spain, even from the United States. There's this group called Amazon United, mostly from Chicago and New York. But we've yet to introduce this kind of close connection between the warehouse workers and the transport workers to support the transport workers in organizing. But on the other hand, one good thing when we are so far away for so long from our bosses is that we are not under this like strict control from the bosses. So yeah, so even if we don't have this kind of big formal union, we can organize so we got the internet group now that comprises 260 workers, transport drivers in my company, where we share our strategies and make some surveys concerning our demands towards the bosses. So whenever for example, now, because you mentioned, Dario, about some formal regulations or some contracts, agreements that progressed the struggle, or were the effect of the progress of the struggle of the camioneros. Here in Europe, there are some regulations that might secure us, but when people are not organized, then this regulation is just like a piece of paper, doesn't work much. So for example, right now we got this mobility package that is a kind of like a set of regulations trying to be imposed on the European Union level, concerning the wage, concerning the how much can we stay out of our homes, and so on and so forth. One of them is that we also shouldn't spend weekends in the trucks, because we sleep in the trucks. Yeah. Also during the weekends, like every day we stay in the trucks for most of our life. But according to these new regulations, the bosses should provide us with some hotels for the weekends. The regulations are part of the struggle of French truck drivers, who are the most militant ones and are able to do some stuff internationally as well, not only locally. Yeah, like if there is no such a kind of high level of organized the power in other countries, it's still difficult to defend the regulations that were imposed on European level. So one of them is about spending the nights on the hotels during the weekends. Formally, because we got the tachometers, tachographs. I don't know if Argentinian truck drivers got these electronic tachographs that measure the time of work, time of driving. We got them. We got the electronic ones. Earlier on, we had the analog ones, which were far easier to cheat on as far as time of driving is concerned, limit of time of driving is concerned. With the electronic ones, it's not that easy, but it's still possible. So formally, when you spend the night in the hotel, you need to take your card, your ID card from the tachograph. So the bosses press the workers to take it off. But if they are not close to us, we can just always say that there's some inspection going around, so there is higher risk of taking it off, or we can just not reply with the SMS to the boss. So like within several weeks, when the bosses started to doing this, to forcing us to take the count of the tachometers, we at least resisted this. And thanks to this, when the inspection comes, when it gives the fine goes to the company and not to the workers, to the transport drivers. So we got also a set of demands, but the survey is mostly being done through the internet because of the fact that we don't see each other very often. One of them is hiking in the wages to 10 euros per day. The other is because I told you about the fact that we drive to our companies even 500 kilometers, so we want to have compensation for coming and going to the workplace. We also want to have more time off, so we don't want to stay so long in one row, like 20 or 30 days in a row in the truck. So basically we want to stay as much as mostly like 2 weeks of work and have 2 weeks of free time. And we're fighting also for some night shift bonuses and so on and so forth. Yeah, this is maybe because sorry, I was speaking maybe too long. So, yeah. If you have any more questions, then I can answer them.
Fantastic, thank you. And no, not too long at all. It's fascinating to hear, and it's very rare, certainly for a British audience, to be able to speak with you, Artek. So thank you very much for your contribution as well. So before we go to some of the questions that have been submitted, just another shout out to people. If you want to ask a question on Facebook, please put it in the comments. If you want to ask a question on Zoom, please use the Q&A function. So Dario and Andre, we've had a few questions in, so I'm going to start to go through those, and I'll address you based on what people have submitted. So the first one is to Dario. So could you bring us up to the current with how the truckers union use its power to disrupt the logistics sector to recompose their power and extract gains? That's the first question for you, Dario. And then for you, Artek, and this is one from me, I'm afraid. I'm going to abuse my position as chair, so I hope that's okay. But people in this country and also in America and around the world very much had a lot of eyes on Bessemer, Alabama, and about the vote there to form a union as part of an Amazon warehouse. And I just wondered your reflections on that and whether your comrades have discussed that in terms of the result of it, but also that as a tactic around worker power and what your union and you as your comrades think about that in Poland. But we come to Dario first, then Artek, but please do put your questions now. Rare opportunity to speak to Dario and to Artek, so please take us up on that opportunity. So thank you, Dario, and then Artek. Thanks.
Okay, so the chapter was finished about 2 years ago. Because the book was supposed to be published by the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. But the current situation in the middle of the pandemic is more or less the same, and the power that Moyano and the Camioneros have has not changed during these last 2 years. There have been some conflicts related to supermarkets, for example, with pickets. There have been some new conflicts related to distribution of newspapers and magazines and etc. And they won again. And they have a very particular fight with the establishment. When I mean establishment, I mean even part of the present government. This new government has kind of social democratic face in some of the things they are proposing, and it's not neoliberal that the one when I wrote the chapter. However, ministers of both governments say, or even are saying today, that when the union makes a picket, this is extortion. So they call this the union an extortion union, that they get what they want for their workers through extortion. The reply of the union is, this is the CBA, this is the law, this is what we have signed, this is what you have to fulfill. We have our inspectors that will go to the factory, the supermarkets, etc., and you will have to fulfill just what is written in the law. So they win and win and win again. And again, I would try to not to be stubborn, but to insist on this idea of the leadership related to a guy that is strong but looks like the other workers. It's not like, even though he of course is a rich man already, but he doesn't look like the traditional, those kind of bosses of unions that have nothing to do with their colleagues. They do. They really do. I don't know if I replied, Robert, your question. I did.
Thanks. And then Ante, what do you think about Bessemer? What have people said about Bessemer? I've got another question for you as well.
Before I speak about Bessemer, just one word about the this figure of Dario in Argentina. In Poland, we don't have much. Workers don't have much trust in this kind of figure of a big leader, because of the fact that our history of workers' history during Solidarność movement and the end of state capitalist regime. So we had this Lech Wałęsa, who was the leader of the union, and then he became the first president after transition to capitalism, which introduced all these SAPs, all the shock therapies into the world of workers, all the privatization, deregulation and stuff. So we don't have a lot of trust in this kind of a figure. Yeah, maybe we got just different tradition here. And as far as Bessemer is concerned, so you speak about the vote, yeah, about the vote in Amazon in Bessemer that was lost by the union there. So basically, we consider this approach of the union in Bessemer as a kind of we call it corporate unionism. So they used a lot of media attention. They gained some support from the big politicians like Bernie Sanders and so on and so forth. But this kind of approach doesn't concentrate much on, and doesn't put a lot of effort in building small social bonds between the workers. Yeah. So while for example, in the United States, what is closer to our approach is what Amazonians United are doing, meaning building power inside the warehouse, getting hired there, which requires time, yeah, but it's more fruitful, more effective from our perspective, and also you can see how much fruit it brings in the States, like what the Amazonians United did in Chicago and other sites at Amazon, fighting for PTO, fighting for higher wages. They now they fight against megacycle. They don't even form a union, but they form a strong community, like a grassroots type of union. And yeah, we believe in this sort of stuff, and I see it brings more effects.
Thanks very much, Antek, and yeah, it'd be interesting to discuss that at much more length, but that's a very good answer, so thank you very much for that. Another question for you, Dario. So one of the forms of power for the union was that they integrated the many different kinds of drivers and logistic workers in critical commodities production, especially for export. Can you describe what they did and why it gave them power? And then to you, Antek, we've had one through, which is related to some news today. So Jeff Bezos has flown into space today. and thanked customers for paying him to do so. And the question said, would you like to reply, Artek? But that's maybe a question for anyone who uses Amazon, but your reflections on that and what workers that work for Amazon think of that. I can imagine what your answer will be, but I'll come to you first, Dario, and then to you, Artek. Then we've got a few more. So if you've got your questions, please get them in via the comments on Facebook and also via the Q&A button if you're watching us via Zoom. Thanks, Dario.
One of the key issues of Argentinian economy has been is inflation, because this is a country that produces food for 300 or 400 million people, but even though that food is expensive, the problem is always related to the loss of dollars for improving the economy and for new investments. So why do I say this? Because one of the things that camioneros always get is that the salary will always be at the same level of the inflation. If inflation is 20%, they get 20.5. If inflation is 40%, they get 41%. This is year by year, every time. And if they don't get it, they say, we will go to a strike, or we may go to a strike in this branch or in this branch. So they can, they can stop the economy in so many different ways. Related to the critical commodities production, they got some extra benefits for truckers that really carry those loads to the ports, because not every branch is exactly related to commodities. They got overtime expenses paid. They got expenses paid by kilometers traveled. They got some extra travel expenses paid. They got some payments related to control of charge, loading and unloading charges, and for the responsibility of controlling that being made at the port. So I would presume they would make it short. They got respect from the owners, the capitalists, and also they got respect from other unions. So it's not only a question of salary, it's salary and benefits plus all the other things I've just mentioned. By the way, during the 60s and 70s, there has been a very strong movement of grassroots assemblies in the factories in Argentina before the dictatorship coup of 1976. If you want to build Hugo Moyano or other union leaders kind of, oh, they come from there. No, he doesn't. He doesn't. But he learned. They're not, the truckers union, camioneros, is not what we in Spanish call asambleario. It's not something that is related to assemblies and grassroots and discussions in factories, etc., etc. But he learned that that workers can build, truckers and other employees, workers can build those kind of assemblies. That's why he's, fighting for those benefits and salaries and health service and so forth. As I wrote in the chapter, it's a mass union. It's a movement union, but it's not a, how do you say it in English? It's not a first line fighter union like some others. I don't know if you got the idea. I hope so.
Thanks, Dario. And then on to Jeff Bezos and what people make of that.
Yeah, you spoke about consumers, so So as I said, we are not good consumers in Poland for Amazon. So like our wages are 4 times less than lower than in Germany, and we can buy for them, as far as purchasing power is concerned, we can buy 2 times as little bread as in Germany. So we'd like to consume more as workers, actually, you know. Yeah, basically speaking about space travels, I wonder about the carbon footprint of this travel. Like basically Amazon now, because here in Poland we the elites, liberal elites, the bourgeois are using this greenwashing to fight against coal miners. But we checked as Amazon workers and truck drivers that Amazon actually footprint is bigger than the carbon footprint of 5 of 10 biggest coal plants in the European Union. So and because of the space travel, it might be even like more if we consider the private what Bezos is privately doing. But sometimes me as a truck driver, I drive with even carrying less than 500 kilograms of stuff from Germany to Italy, you know, through the Alps. So it's totally irrational from the ecological point of view, but we do it because the fuel is cheaper than the labor. So like, I mean, I would love to drive between the sites in Poland, but we are not good consumers for Amazon. So we don't consume almost anything from Amazon. So we drive from Poland to France and so on and so forth. While Bezos is doing the space travels, yeah. I wouldn't like to say that I want to make as many kilometers as Bezos. You know, our approach is to make less kilometers. His approach is to make more. Yeah. What else can I say?
Fantastic. That's enough about Jeff Bezos for now. But I wonder, Ante, if we can just finish with you. It's got one last question for you. It's kind of a series of questions, but allow you to kind of summarize what you said, which has been really interesting and how the parallels with Dario's talk. So can you describe the way Amazon tracks you, the way and warehouse workers? So you kind of talked about it a little bit, but just some more information on that. And have you identified choke points in the distribution network as workers, real points of leverage where you've got that organizational power? And then how do you plan to organize around some of the demands? You talked about some of them in your presentation, but how that goes forward. And I guess from StrikeMap UK, how we go about supporting your comrades in that struggle in organising around those issues, and then after that we'll look to sum up. Thanks.
Could you repeat the first part of the question because I didn't hear the?
Yeah, no, sorry. I said, can you describe the way that Amazon tracks you and warehouse workers? So some of that, because that's talked about a little bit, but I think it's helpful to actually hear it from someone who actually has experienced it as opposed to reading it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so basically Amazon is using this app called Amazon Relay, and through this app it tracks the route of my truck and the trailer, and but we are not as much under control as, for example, last mile drivers, the ones with driving the vans. So they are mostly working like on the same basis as Uber or Volt or whatever, yeah. And they are under far bigger pressure from Amazon application, Amazon algorithm than the international transport drivers. Also because of the fact that they are doing this like short distances, and yeah. So basically, we don't feel a lot of pressure from Amazon app, and we can always say that because we change borders a lot, so the internet doesn't work well, blah blah. Yeah. So at this moment, I don't feel Amazon can put a lot of pressure on me, but yeah. As far as choke points concerned, so. As I said, like basically, Amazon is totally dependent on truck drivers from eastern part of Europe, and Poland is one of the most important site for for sorting and for sending the packages. So we've been doing some stuff, like, for example, blocking the gates of Amazon. We've been like considering putting in common the knowledge of the truck drivers and the warehouse workers on what is the best moment to form a blockade. So on December 14 or 15, 2020, we did so. We chose the hour which was the best from the perspective of the transport drivers, from our perspective, to block one of the biggest site of Amazon. And thanks to our knowledge gained from driving under Amazon, we didn't need much time even to form a traffic. After maybe 3 hours of the blockade, the traffic jam lasted until almost the end of the day, because we chose the right moment. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there are some moments with bigger traffic at each of Amazon warehouses, and we can identify these moments. Amazon, on the other hand, uses transport drivers to break the strike. So, for example, whenever a strike in Germany is undergoing, or a blockade in Poland, then Amazon can use transport drivers to move to take the packages from other warehouses, yeah, or to like when there were situations in which Germany striked, German Amazon workers. So then more work was put into Polish warehouses, but all this work is being moved by transport drivers. So it's crucial for us to establish a strict connection between logistics and transport, and like strong solidarity to break the strategy of Amazon on the international level. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and that's a fantastic way, I think, to end this show. And thank you very much for your participation, and a huge thank you to Dario and to Robert. If you haven't already, please do read Dario's chapter. It really is an excellent read. I recommend it to everyone, and we put links in the chat, and we'll send them by email. A huge thank you also to the tech team behind the scenes that have made this call happen. So that's Mike Jocelyn and Matthew Goodman. We'll be back at Book Club on the 9th of August, and we'll be joined by Sean as he talks about his chapter in Robert's book, as we look at the self-organising of workers in South Africa. Again, another really interesting chapter from a different part of the world. So please give that a read. Again, the links will be available on our social media feeds. So give that chapter a read and come and discuss that with Sean. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been Book Club. We'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.